Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today I am very excited to present for you the Astrology of December with my colleagues and friends Alexandra and Whitney. We have a bunch of really interesting transits happening in the month of December to close out the year, including, of course, the big Jupiter-Saturn square, a bunch of interesting aspects with Venus, a lot of things to break down for you. So I'm very excited that they will be back with me again to help us look at all of the astrology of the month ahead. That is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Your comments and feedback and stories are always interesting. It really helps grow the channel and community. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Don't forget, we are in the midst of my 11th annual Kickstarter campaign, which it's hard to believe it's been 11 years. But we are in the process of trying to raise the support of 1,937 backers by January 1st. We're off to a really good start. Thank you, everybody who has already donated. And if you haven't yet donated, you can find the link to the Kickstarter in the comments section of this video, pinned to the top, or the description of this video. You can also find it on the website, nightlightastrology.com. There's a little 2025 Kickstarter tab. When you go over to the Kickstarter page, you will see a little sidebar that you can scroll down, and there are different tiers of rewards when you donate. We try to give you back some really cool gifts. We have really good deals on all of our online programs. The savings is over 50% off, goes all the way up to almost 75% off when you bundle programs together. So a great way to support the channel and also get some really cool exclusive talks, readings, classes that we offer. At the end of today's video, after we sign off, there is a little video that will tell you about the rewards that are available when you support the channel. So this is something that we are really, really excited about. Every year, the last days of the calendar year, we try to rally the support of all of you in the audience. And it enables us to do a lot of things to support our staff, to support all the need-based programs that we offer, the need-based astrology reading service that we now provide. So yeah, a big thanks again to everyone who's already donated. And if you haven't yet, please consider pitching in and supporting us. We really appreciate it. On that note, I will now bring on my homies, Alexandra and Whitney. Hey, guys.
Hey, hey. I'm leaning into the homie.
Yeah. My astrology homies. So I have a question for both of you, which is, how is November? How has Pluto into Aquarius been, aside from bringing aliens back into the picture immediately?
In a big way, immediately.
Wasn't that wild?
Yeah, that was crazy. How have you guys been?
Been pretty good. I honestly, Cap rising here, I have late the 25 ascendant. Every single day feels lighter than the last. It's been incredible. Whitney and myself and another friend, Sarah, did a Pluto party on Monday night. And I had planned in my head, after I sign off, I'm going to do some big intense ritual to say goodbye. And I sat down to do that. And I was just like, I am so exhausted. What I got out was like 4 sentences. And I was like, it is the end of these things. And that was my ritual. And now I'm done. And it feels great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, Pluto into Aquarius has felt, well, being an Aquarius sun, I am oddly very excited for this ingress. Call me crazy. I don't mind. You know what though? While I haven't felt a whole lot right yet personally, I'm just feeling it in the air. Do you guys get that? It's feeling really palpable. And honestly, I think also because this ingress happened across this Mercury-Jupiter opposition, things have just felt a little overwhelming, like a little nuts. So not to mention, okay, aliens in the media. Oh, and now talks about, Associated Press is twittering about the possibilities of a third world war. So I don't know. Here we go. Buckle up, folks.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I did a couple of talks on Pluto in Aquarius, one on my YouTube channel, and then a webinar that I had planned. And the title of the webinar was AI, Aliens, and New World Orders. And I gave it like 3 days after, or 4 days after the hearings with the Pentagon officials were taking place. And I was like, wow. I mean, couldn't time it better. And it ended up being one of my more popularly attended webinars. And I was just like, well, I mean, I planned it for the week of the ingress on purpose, right? But I wasn't anticipating it would be so, like, you couldn't have timed out the appearance of this topic so perfectly. And that really seemed to generate a lot of buzz for the webinar, which was pretty cool. I feel like the thing that can be a little, I don't know, it can be a little deflating is that people think to themselves, Pluto shifted signs and houses. I haven't noticed anything, like that does happen. Yeah. and obviously one of the reasons that happens is because it is a 20-year transit through a house. And if it's not contacting a planet right away, you really have to you got to give it a minute, because some of the themes, some of the topics being activated by virtue of being in a new house will just take a few weeks or months to kind of show themselves, or even for us to start feeling something a little different. And sometimes it's right away. I've already heard lots of stories from people just right away, noticeable things shifting. But yeah, it definitely was the news of November. So I was curious to hear, just how it landed with both of you.
It also started, dipping in and out in spring 2023. So if you trace back a little bit and think about that, you might find some more overlap in your life in the ways that it's been coming up for you. But I agree, Adam, I like your general philosophy that you teach in all your classes and on your channel of outer planet transits. I mean, really not everyone feels outer planets keenly unless it's making a close degree based, particularly a conjunction, but any other aspect as well to something natally for you. You may not feel it as anything other than a mood shift, or maybe even a mood shift in the collective. But
yeah, I mean, for me, like I think about this because I have the South Node at about 2 degrees of Aquarius. And so last year, as it dipped in and started connecting with that South Node, there were very visible shifts happening, turnover of staff. We brought in 3 new people, including the 2 of you and Dana, for horoscopes. Like, there was just a bunch of shifts. We started designing the need-based astrology service. So that's my 10th house, and it was hitting the South Node, and also just bringing up patterns of fatigue and exhaustion. I ended up taking a break from doing readings, which I'm still on while I write my book. So it was so powerful. And I attribute that, of course, to the fact that as soon as it entered, for me, it was touching something in the chart, the sensitive point of the South Node. And that's how it tends to be with those big transits like that. If it comes into the house, you can expect that you might see the activation of the house topics upon the ingress. But if not, wait until it really starts kind of getting within, maybe 3 degrees or so of a planetary aspect in the chart. And then all of a sudden, you'll see that things have been in motion, but now they're sort of really showing themselves to you,
Yeah, to that point, I think most commonly when someone says, hey, can you check out what was going on when this big life event happened? It's almost never just one contact. There is a keystone contact, but there's usually 3 or 4 close contacts. There's perfection years. There's all kinds of other stuff going that's overlapping. Like Pluto dipped into my 2nd house in Aquarius in February 2023 or March 2023. I didn't notice things right away. I was definitely more concerned with like budgeting, but there was an eclipse that happened directly on my MC and Pluto, and I got laid off from my corporate job right when that happened. So it was like there were multiple contacts that kind of activated this major career shift for me that's clearly been happening over the past 2 years. But it didn't just happen right away when Pluto scrolled on in.
Right.
Right. And, if we're not feeling it quite yet, I think we're going to feel it a little bit this month when Venus there conjoins Pluto.
Yeah. And that's another great point, Whitney, is that, is once you get some other planets starting to work with it too in the new sign, because we really haven't had we had the Pluto-Mars dynamic right before the shift. And that was palpable. Like I definitely, felt some shifts around that one. My dad successfully had his knee replaced.
Good.
Yeah. And so every single one of you who sent me an email telling me I was a terrible son and astrologer for not warning him of his death in that surgery, you can all sit on it. But anyway, I'm not kidding. I got like 30 emails from people being like, that I shared that. And then they were like, you should have warned him. What kind of astrologer are you? I'm like, the kind of astrologer who doesn't freak out. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
But mostly people were really supportive on the channel, but I was really shocked. I was like, well, and that's on me for sharing with people that my dad was having a surgery. So
Yeah. Wow.
And there's a way we don't want to intervene totally with fate, right? So I think you took the right approach.
I stand by my philosophy, which is that, you know, family members, if they want to know something astrologically, or they want my advice about something, I'm happy to give it, but I don't give unsolicited astrological advice. I just don't. That's my philosophy. Apparently there was a subsection of people who really felt like, you know, I was going to be the cause of him dying. Like literally got emails, like 30 of them like that. So I was really like, you know, it's actually, that was an intense part of the Mars Pluto transit itself.
The fear.
Yeah. As Mars Pluto was coming on, those emails came in, and I was like,
oh my gosh. God. That's why I think it's so funny that people are like, oh, that transit means this bad thing's going to happen. Well, a surgery is bad. Isn't a surgery bad enough? Isn't surgery a Mars Pluto event?
And to be honest with you, like, he had Pluto on his ascendant in Capricorn, which rules the knees, you know, opposite Mars, and Mars is the god of surgery, right? So, and, you know, Mars in its fall, like, okay, yeah, you could get concerned, but when that date is somehow naturally selected and the surgeons are confident that there's some risks involved with the surgery like that, but like, they're very confident it's going to go well. I feel very confident that that's a fitting placement for a surgery on your knee too, you know? So I don't mess with things that are just happening naturally. Another thing that was really interesting though was around the Mars Pluto opposition there. So just to reflect back on those emails, there was a palpable way in which I felt a sense of release and relief of anxiety and fear as the opposition came through myself. You know, as astrologers, it's easy to build up certain transits as like really, oh, it's going to hit so hard. There were some things I dealt with that were definitely like tumultuous, but as it was coming through and I was like, oh, okay, this is it. There was a way in which even I was releasing fear and anxiety. So I could actually sympathize with people who, you know, get really spun out by transits. But that's a great one to learn from, because, you know, it turns out, well, some things came up that were difficult. Like a lot of what came up was fear and anxiety. So
yeah, such an important lesson, because I feel like we can all, with how entrenched we become in the astrology, we can all get caught up in the astro anxiety.
Yeah.
Hi, Hilda.
There's Hilda. Someone is home downstairs, so she is like all ears because Mama's home. I'm going to open the door because otherwise she'll start whining at the door.
Sure thing.
Talk amongst yourselves.
I think this is why, you know, I just never do my personal astrology, and I think that's the best strategy.
I love that about you, because it makes me feel so normal for not wanting to read too much into my chart either. Of course, I look here and there, you know, when I saw that the Mercury-Jupiter opposition here in the middle of November was right on top of my Mars. Mercury was like, oh, so that makes sense as to why everything is go, 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 go in my professional life.
Well, on that note, shall I share a few of the stories that we have from last month from all of you?
Yes, we want to hear from you.
All of our subscribers have such good stories. All of you guys out there. This is someone with Mars opposite Pluto who ended up fracturing a bone in their foot in 2 places. And as a very active person, this was a pretty devastating event, even though the injury is not super serious. It'll heal pretty easily. And I just feel like there's a great example. Mars Pluto, we worry about accidents, we worry about injuries, we worry about physical harm or illness as a manifestation. And what was more frustrating about this for this individual, I won't share the story because it's kind of long, it's just that they can't walk, wait, train, drive for a minute. They got to take a break from those things. And that limited mobility is the frustrating part, more so than the accident was devastating, if that makes sense.
Oh,
That's a
sure.
great
And
manifestation of Mars
when
Pluto.
physical activity is like your outlet, then yeah, that can be challenging and cause that anxiety in a whole other way, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's funny because I mean that it goes back to that thing about, well, the interesting thing about mobility is like, so I called my dad after the surgery. I said, how'd it go? And he was like, great, and he was like, it's starting to dawn on me though that I have a long road back to walking again, because you have to, it's a new knee. You gotta
Yes.
kind of wear it in and get used to it. And it's like almost like physical therapy kind of a process. And he was like, I just didn't realize how frustrating it was going to be immobile. So isn't that interesting that we have actually two different stories that mirror that thing? That was like, was it devastating? No, but did it frustrate you because you couldn't move forward, right? You couldn't be mobile? Yes. That's really interesting. So the same thing happened to me. I had a shift in one of my bodybuilding coaches returning to competitions. And so I had to shift to a different coach. Found a really great one. And his philosophy of training is very different, very slow, more like shorter periods and more intensely focused. I think I might have told you guys about this last time. But anyway, that I was applying the new training program as Mars was opposite Pluto and finding myself really frustrated because I'm used to training intensely for really long periods of time, and I'm pulling it back and feeling like, oh no, I'm not going to get the same thing, the same result. I'm not, like, my progress is going to be impeded, blah, 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 blah. Well, it turns out that it's the absolute opposite. My progress is moving along as good as it ever has in terms of the kind of plan that I have mapped out with my coach. And it's because I'm doing less, not more. And my Mars Pluto was about the anger and frustration I felt in having to accept a program that I thought wasn't going to be as good. There's that thing about frustration with Mars Pluto that's really palpable,
100%.
I think that really ties into like the astrology that's happening this month. We're having, from July, we had that like mutable grand cross, July and August. That's happening all over again with this Mercury retrograde forming in and out with Saturn and Jupiter. And it feels, I'll talk more about it when we get into it, but it just feels like everyone's being stress tested and turned and poked and prodded in different ways. And if you've got mutables, I feel for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone says Mars opposite Pluto, another Mars opposite Pluto story. I'm a Libra rising. Over the weekend, as Mars in 10th was opposing Pluto in my 4th, we had a new roommate move in. The past several days have been nothing short of an all-out cleaning war between her and my landlord. She claims her room is uninhabitable, so my landlord is deep cleaning it. She's sleeping on the couch, not even moved in, cleaning everything with vinegar while this happens. She's essentially demanding to be paid for the time she spent cleaning, even though my landlord is footing the bill for professional cleaners. He's outraged by her request. She believes he's a negligent landlord. It's been 5 days of all-out war.
Oh my God.
Isn't that Mars Pluto? I thought that was a pretty good story there.
Oh God, that's so good.
Yeah, that's classic. Let's see if I can find maybe one more. Mars in Leo here. Wasn't this one that we had looked at? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a funny moment occur at work after Mars ingressed into Leo. Cap rising, so it's in my 8th house. I had sent off a very spicy yet professional email for work that my boss asked me to send, and it got more accomplished in a day than everyone being gentle and nice had been able to get done in 3 weeks. My boss suggested he wanted to give me a raise if I could keep doing that when we need it, so a renegotiation around my contract with work could take place if I utilized my own Mars, and my bosses loved my effort.
Let me guess, Mars in the 2nd house.
Well, this was Mars in the 8th.
This Mars in the
8th. Oh, well, yeah, there you go. Same axis.
Gaining the esteem of other people through your bossy show of power. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah,
I love it.
Good for you. Great. You get it. That sounds like Mars and Leo, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Oh my gosh. Pluto transitioned into Aquarius in my 2nd house, someone says. The moment it transitioned, it immediately squared my natal Mars in my 11th, and all of my charts that I had saved for people in Astro Gold disappeared.
No.
Yeah. That's interesting because I can see the connection between a collection of people that you have the data on.
The resources.
Yeah. Like, that's really interesting. Yeah. So Saturn square Venus. This is a long one. Let me just see if I can pick the highlights from it. So went to visit parents who recently moved to a city far away from me, partly because my sister also lives there, just had her second child. I had to block my mom earlier this year on WhatsApp because she sent me some hurtful messages, and she's talking about she struggles with some mental health stuff. And so anyway, with the help of my therapist, I managed to process some of this. And that Venus Saturn weekend, my father celebrated his 80th birthday, and my sister welcomed her newborn. I wanted to put the conflict with my mom behind me, so I got on the train. The visit turned out to be the biggest challenge of the year. I laughed a lot with my dad. I held my nephew, new member of the family. My parents seemed content in their new home. My mother even told me they had never been as happy as they are now. Everything seemed to fit. And I was truly happy for them because it felt like the best solution. Yet at the same time, I constantly fought back tears, doing my best to keep the mood light. Internally, it was the saddest experience I've ever had. I never felt so abandoned. And I think this is because they moved close to her sister, as she was explaining, and seemed to be doing happier and feeling better. And maybe also partly she was trying to communicate that it seemed like they were happier because, or at least her mom was, because she's like away from her and feeling abandoned by that. And she is talking about what a bittersweet experience this was with respect to love for her sister, love for the new baby, and yet pain with respect to maybe a little bit of jealousy that's happening because of mom's privileging of the sister. That sounds like Venus Saturn. That sounds like a Venus Saturn kind of situation.
Right. And maybe working on some kind of healthy boundaries or the establishing of that in that dynamic. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this one. Sun in Scorpio opposite Uranus in Taurus. Out of the blue, I decided to enroll in your astrology program.
Hell yeah. Welcome.
I love that. It's like, let's do something totally Uranian and start studying astrology. I mean, there are so many Uranus transits that correspond with people studying astrology. It's amazing.
You mentioned that with Pluto into Aquarius in your Pluto into Aquarius talk, and I can't tell you how excited I got about the idea of astrology becoming the new yoga, right? Or like what yoga did 20 years ago or thereabouts for astrology. Yeah. I'm like, oh, we're trendsetters, guys. Look at us.
Yeah. I mean, like really, like if you think about the one of the major developmental periods of yoga going mainstream was when Pluto was in Sagittarius. And if you think about the appropriateness of yoga and its history and its philosophy and its physical nature, and then you consider that astrology really does match some of the descriptions and sort of vibes of Aquarius, I think it's safe to say that the Pluto in Aquarius era could very well be a very positive one for astrology becoming an alternative spiritual holistic health modality that's more broadly accepted, like yoga became. That doesn't mean there still won't be woo and you having to weed through a lot of maybe charlatanism or, just kind of phony baloney, but
I think astrologers.
It's exciting though,
We talked about that on our Pluto party. Whitney was like, I'm hoping to see some we talked about it last month too, but just hoping to see like a hyperhumanism movement. And we were thinking, Pluto has also a correcting ability for fears that emerged in the previous sign or movements, surfacing fears against movements. I was like, the fact that Pluto's headed for Pisces, I think means we're sure to see some humanism emerge.
Yeah. You know what I found interesting, and I presented this in the Pluto webinar, was that what I was finding when I look back at the last Pluto and Aquarius period is because it has such it really amplifies the rational, high-minded qualities of air. And yet during that period, there was this gradual pushback against rationalism as romanticism started emerging and then fully took off when Pluto went into Pisces. So I was like, oh, isn't that fascinating that, you can think of a period like Pluto and Aquarius as amplifying rational things. You can also expect that when those things are amplified, you're going to get this subtle pushback into something more feminine, imaginative, romantic, emotional.
The dialectical, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a good way of thinking about it so that we don't try to delineate in a vacuum. Yeah. But anyway, let's get into the astrology of December now and turn the corner. We have some really interesting transits to break down. We've broken it into a few different sections. We're going to look at the opening of the month. There's our slick title. And then
Very specific.
I did my best.
It is accurate.
and then we're going to go to a period that we are calling Venus, hot and cold.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go into the full moon period, which is another little chunk of the month. We'll give you all the dates of the transits around these times too. And then we'll go to the month's end where there's a few transits at the very end of the month we'll be looking at. So on that note, let's start at the beginning of December with the new moon. The month begins with a new moon in the sign of Sagittarius. I'm going to do my best to highlight these things here on the screen. The banner's blocking it a little bit, so why don't I take this out? You can see it right there. There's the new moon at about 9 degrees of Sagittarius. This is early Sunday morning, December 1st, so you might be feeling it kind of like Saturday night into Sunday. But for certain though, on Sunday, we're in the new moon's domain. So Saturday into Sunday, December 1st, the new moon in Sagittarius. This sets up a number of transits that come right around the exact same time. So we're going to be breaking down a bunch of them between the 1st and the 5th of the month. But let's start here. And I'd just love to hear from you guys first. What are you thinking about this new moon in Sagittarius? What else in the sky is going on that you think is a part of the new moon signature or worth bringing into it? Let's start there.
You know what? I feel like this new moon is really optimistic. It's Sagittarius, right? Like we are trying to bound forward. Now, are we able to bound forward? I don't know about that because we've got a lot of mutability going on with this entire month, right?
Yeah.
So, while I think that this is generally positive, right, as we're integrating the lightness and the optimism, we're also battling with how we're overcoming our darkness and balancing our desires and ambition, right? This one feels definitely existential to me. Obviously, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius and our big thoughts and ideas. But the other thing about Sagittarius, and I say this because I have a lot of Sagittarians in my life, and Sag loves to party, I think this could be a fun one, but is it too much? And as part of that, moving forward, we're partying forward, right? Kind of bring us back. Cause then all of a sudden we're like, oh, too much. And I feel like this sets up really the whole theme for the month, which if I could sum up in one little quip, it would be this step-by-step nature. So you'll see that at the same time the new moon in Sag is forming, we've also got the beginnings of this T-square forming, right, in our mutable signs. Yep, exactly. Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter. And this feels like character building, of course, but it's that almost one step forward, one step back, or one step forward, two steps back. We're doing this dance. So while overall this particular one feels positive to me or lighter than where we may have been, I think we could have some undercurrents of little frustration, maybe overwhelm. But I'm curious to know what y'all are thinking.
Yeah, I had this thought in my head about this classic philosophy problem, like Descartes, the philosopher and mathematician. He has this famous experiment that he conducted with wax. And so he would look at the hard wax and he would describe its smell, its sense, the way it felt, the way it looked. And then he would melt the wax and it would look and smell and feel quite different. And he could describe it. And he was asking himself, how do we know that this melted pool of wax is the same thing as this hard piece of wax?
Mm.
And basically came to the conclusion that it's our mind, it's our reason. We can't rely on our senses alone. We need our reasoning. But just that experiment is how I feel about the mutable stuff that's been going on from summer through winter. It's like a piece of wax being stress tested and melted and turned around and considered. And how does it look if it's in this shape? And how does it look if I apply this heat to it, or if I put it in the freezer? Like, these things going on in the mutable signs are just testing all of the different ways that we adapt and move and change. And it started this summer with really like a target into the Sagittarius part. And now we've arrived with stuff going on in those degrees, especially 9 through 16 Sagittarius. And it's kind of hitting like anybody who has Virgo stuff. You're going to be caught in this basically a grand cross for you. So I was just thinking about the stress testing, and I obviously have a Gemini sun. So I was really feeling like that kind of was a part of my life and felt relevant to what's happening here.
Yeah. I think about the new moon in Sagittarius as like, obviously it's this time of year. But when you have the ruler of the new moon, Jupiter, participating in a Jupiter-Saturn square within the cycle, that makes it a really Jupiterian cycle in the sense that there's systematic or paradigmatic change that's at work. And it's not, we had some of it, we got a little taste of it in August, now again in June of next year with new Jupiter and Saturn in new signs. So I look back, I just made a video that'll go on next week, I believe. And it's on the history of the last hard aspects of the last Jupiter-Saturn cycle. And so I went through all of them, and I gave people journal prompts for each that I myself tested out under each period. And I just shared a few little highlights from the journal exercises that I used on myself to see if they'd be good prompts for other people to use.
That's so cool.
Cool.
I think you guys will like it if you check out that video and try the exercises. It was really cool. Of course, you have to have a little bit of a memory. Like, not everyone has a great memory. Totally fine. But the ways, the things that are like, I looked at one of the Jupiter-Saturn dynamics that was, I became a parent, right? And that period of time started gradually shifting my understanding of life, perceptions, attitudes, beliefs. And that gradually led, by the end of the era of the Jupiter-Saturn square, into closing our yoga studio, moving our work online so we could be more present with our family and with the early part of parenting and all that kind of stuff. And I just look at that, and I look at everything that was happening at the same time was shifting. I was at that point, that was 2015, my daughter was born. That same year, I was in the process of shifting my practice to Hellenistic. So, a philosophical change was very overt in one area of my life. And then in this other area, these experiences of parenting were broadly changing the paradigm as well. And I could track them out by houses, but even just looking at the two of them together was impressive. So the first thing that comes to my mind with a new moon in Sag, given everything we're talking about, this big T square, I love the idea of, kind of stress testing. And I love the idea of kind of an incremental back and forth and a character building experience for sure. I like all of that. And I also think to myself, we're in the midst of a kind of shift of paradigm. An overt example of that is like, the new elected president filling out his cabinet. Like, that's a very mundane example that would be the case whoever was coming in right now, I would assume,
100%.
right? But that's the kind of thing where it's like a reorganization of systems, structures. Well, for most of us on the personal level, those things can be very subtle to track. But when you have a Mercury retrograde and in a new moon cycle that's pretty close to that Mercury retrograde, and the Mercury's getting in on it, this is a month where I feel like some of the changes could come up in like big bursts of enthusiasm, big ideas, big conversations, big debates, big dramatic clashes, hopefully not at the holiday table, so to speak, but like I could see this being a kind of contentious moon cycle because Jupiter and Sag are so fiery and charismatic, and yet we're in the process of change and got Mercury and Jupiter in this very interesting dance with each other this month.
Yeah, that kind of one of the sort of like cultural references that was coming up for me as I was thinking about this was like in The Great Gatsby. It's a little like an inverted version of what you're saying, kind of, but you know, Gatsby comes back and is just like, oh, we're going to be in love now and we're going to be together now and it's all going to be great. And there's this big optimism and there's these grand shows of these displays of affection, but there's all this details and all this stuff and all this murk underneath. And it's like, you can't just paper over that with the optimism and with this big vision. And I was really getting kind of a sense of that, or maybe a sense of even like you go to put on a sad song and then you like realize like, oh, I can't listen to this because I'm actually sad. I actually have to turn this off today.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's interesting. There's a few things that are forming around the new moon that are also worth mentioning. On the 2nd, let's just jump to the 4th really quick, because that part is obviously connected to what we're talking about, and that's the Mercury opposition to Jupiter. So here we have Mercury and Jupiter sign, Jupiter and Mercury sign. That's mutual reception. They're both in their exile and they're opposed. We've talked about this a bunch before. I have brought up my 3rd grade enemy enough now that everyone knows the story. But I mean, it really is like, I came up with a list of 5 things for a video I did for, I just finished all my videos for next week. So I was like, Mercury opposite Jupiter, a reluctant agreement between adversaries. I kept thinking of that phrase, or something that initially looks like a problem that could be an opportunity. I feel like there's just that weird little Hermes twist that could make what looks like something oppositional form into a union.
Right. Like in the end, it's bound to be constructive, but I feel like I am experiencing some of this at work right now, just in my regular corporate job, right? Like, you kind of have to work with people you might not be totally aligned with all the time, right? And so how do you make that work? There can be some of that frustration there. And this to me, with both Mercury and Jupiter retrograde, it feels like that mansplaining email that you get from a coworker that is just like, dude, I think I already said that. What are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Have you guys seen the movie The Room? You know what that is?
Yeah, with the
Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah.
So it's like an iconic cult classic movie, and it's iconic for being so bad. Like Tommy Wiseau, the director and creator, loved it so much and was so passionately devoted to it. But the movie is really cringy, but it became really popular because of that. And there was even a documentary recently about his like really intense ambition and singular vision that kind of broke the movie, but then also made it. And I kind of like just couldn't get Tommy Wiseau out of my head for that either.
Oh, wait, is that the one that came out just like, was it a long time ago? Or is
The Disaster Artist? The Room came out a long time ago, and it's been a cult classic. The Disaster Artist came out quite recently.
Okay, no, I'm thinking of a different one. I was thinking of the one where the girl and the boy and her mom were like abducted.
No, good God, no! I would not bring that movie. Broke me, yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I was like, I thought that's what you're talking about. I was like, where are we going?
I'm talking about this like very corny cult classic. Like it's played at midnight in our indie movie theaters. It's like that kind of movie, and it has a true cult, incredible following. But it's like a really bad movie. So that's kind of what was bringing it up for me.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So we have this interesting Mercury opposite Jupiter moment, which again really is in some ways like spurring on the idea of philosophical or systematic or organizational shifts or changes. This Mercury encounter with Jupiter is happening as Jupiter is applying into the square with Saturn, and it happens again in direct motion later in the month. I mean, we get Mercury direct around the 15th, and then I can't remember at what point after that Mercury does come back though and does it again. I'll just go forward a little bit. So Mercury's direct, and then we get the opposition here.
20.
It's on the 27th, 24th, 27th. It's somewhere right by Christmas.
26th. So it's between the 26th and the 27th it comes back again. So you could also kind of bookmark that as another day in the cycle where the exact same dynamic is back for the third and final time. But yeah, let's go back here. We're on the 4th. On the same day, the sun is squaring Saturn. And that, to me, that's interesting because I look at the fact, and I looked at this with Mercury's overcoming of Saturn in the superior square when it was in direct motion. Anything that I've observed since Saturn has been in Pisces that has gone through Sagittarius and hit the superior square to Saturn, and I've have a few really good personal anecdotes about this. I won't go into all of them, but there is a way in which Saturn presents the typical Saturn stuff. It's a little heavy, it's a little weighty, it's maybe really sensitive and kind of melancholic. And the Sagittarian planet in the superior position finds this way of working around with optimism, or, you know, kind of an open-mindedness, or that buoyancy that is so common for Sag, and it finds a way of kind of working around what initially appears as a prohibition. So I actually like this Sun-Saturn square in the midst of the Mercury-Jupiter opposition. I feel like they both present as a problem that's here to be overcome somehow.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about with this, you know, kind of T-square dynamic here, very mutable, right? There's something constructive happening, absolutely, but we're sussing out our options, you know, we're trying on for size. And while constructive overall, I think it's asking us questions like, what is the value I'm bringing here? What is my own worth? Like, what is my contribution in this situation?
Nice.
Definitely see that from the sun, and something of just like pure heart. The next day we have the Mercury Cazimi that's happening right there. And that to me feels a little divine, like especially in
Yes.
Sagittarius, like there's just a little, you know, pat on the back for sticking up for yourself, or, you know, doing something kind of ambitious. I'm very interested in the fact that the moon is tying in that Venus Pluto thing. So it's like moon, Pluto, Venus coming in at the same time.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Mm.
interesting too.
Very interesting. Yeah. I one of the things that I like about this combination is that, again, with the sun overcoming Saturn and then opposing Jupiter, its host, but with this interesting form of mutual reception happening again, I feel like this is okay. This is a sticking point. Or, you know, when someone gives you a feedback and you're on a roll and you're really excited, like one of the things that I learned very quickly when I was in graduate school for creative writing was not to bring anything into workshop that I was on a roll with, because it's important that you stay in a role.
Yeah.
And you know, you get some feedback or criticism and it can knock you right off your creative horse, you know? And so I was very careful about that. I feel like this is a kind of situation, to just use that example, where you might get some feedback that could, in any other situation, that might knock you off your horse. But for whatever reason, this feedback might actually really help you increase your productivity, or you know, get even more creative, or it may just be something you can overcome rather than get sort of set back by. So I'm looking at this almost just in terms of something that could be really constructive, that again, at first look feels like, oh, that should be an impediment, or that should be a no, or a negation, or that looks like a challenge, or someone's telling me it can't be this way, or I'm finding a disagreement. But then all of a sudden there's an opportunity present, or there's the confidence to work around it somehow.
I totally agree. This for me is like that turning on the light switch moment, right? If part of what we're going through is like, what is my worth? What is my value? This is where we feel that, you know, like you said, Alexandra, some divine inspired sense of direction with maybe all the options that we've been weighing throughout this mutability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's, go ahead. I think it sets us up really well for the Mars retrograde, which is like what's happening next.
Right. I want to jump back just really quick because we kind of forgot to touch on Venus. Venus is also right after the new moon. Venus also makes a trine to Uranus. And so I feel like this new moon there's a really charismatic quality behind it, because not only is it a Sagittarius new moon, which just has those fiery vibes, but then Venus trine Uranus. I mean, yes, it's in Earth signs, but Venus trine Uranus is also pretty sparky and creative. And I feel like the fact that Venus is also about to roll right into to Aquarius and conjoin Pluto and then oppose Mars, it does feel like the wheels are turning, and that there's like a kind of enthusiasm and a creative zest that's coming around the new moon. And it's immediately met with the Saturn square to Sun, with the opposition to Jupiter, but there's the mutual reception. I feel like this is a cycle in which there's a vision, there's a mission, there's a hope, there's an excitement, and then there's a kind of like adversity or need for compromises and some kind of pushback, or the kind of thing that could make you want to quit before you've started, but you got to work through it somehow.
Yep, our little unexpected, helpful little earthquakes here with Venus trine Uranus. And how perfect is that? Because then later this month, Venus is going to conjoin Pluto.
What do you think about that Venus trine, Alexandra?
I'm just sitting here thinking of like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in like BBC Sherlock, like with just two people who have completely different approaches to a problem, but who are maybe like working towards the same thing in very different ways. I think the Venus trine, I like this. I agree with you. You know, normally Venus Pluto can be a little spooky, but I think it's got this sort of, I think the word you said was sparky, and that's a really good one, but it's got an initiative to it that I think, again, combined with that Mercury cazimi, it feels like there's maybe even some connection to spirituality or like divineness that people can find there, some advice from somewhere else.
Yeah. I think that the other thing that Venus and Taurus, Capricorn and Taurus might do together on the side of the earthiness is to come up with, you think of Uranus and Taurus as being innovative but pleasurable, and Venus and Capricorn as being pleasurable but productive, or something like that. So, you kind of put them together and you get this kind of something that has some utility, some worth, some value, and there's a spark of pleasure, sensuality, and an emphasis on enjoyment, or something like that. And those two planets coming together, like right under the new moon, has to be a part of whatever it is that Sag is getting so excited about, I would think.
100%. I think Alexandra said it right with the word initiative. Like, this is initiatory, and is this how we initiate more beauty, more peace, more security, more stability, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's the end. And does that do those desires need or require some kind of revisions, rehaul of a system, rethinking? It's like the mutable T-square is sort of saying, okay, that's great, but we're going to have to iron out some details or look at contrasting visions of how this happens, or something like that.
I love that you brought in your corporate life, because a lot of this month is giving like corporate word salad, like strategic realignments and like
let me circle back.
Like, yeah, we need some good corporate word salad to describe this stuff.
We'll put a pin in that.
Oh
yeah, exactly.
No more of that. I get enough from 9 to 5, guys.
That's right. Well, we're going into a period that Alexandra has poetically titled Venus Hot and Cold. And it starts on the 6th with Mars turning retrograde in Leo. So you can see here, we've got the S above Mars, which means Mars has stopped, and on this day will be turning retrograde. We have a bunch of other things happening between the 6th and the 12th over about a 6-day period. 3 out of the 4 involve Venus and Mars. So tell us what I just want to hear, like, what led you to the hot and cold title, because it's actually really interesting, and I think everyone would like that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we got Mars in Leo, and then we've got the Sun and Mercury in Sagittarius. So there's like a loose sign-based trine happening here with those fiery energies. And the Sun and Mars, it's hot. Okay. We got Mercury retrograde coming back to like add some gossip or something warm into that mix there. And then Venus in this, Venus in Capricorn isn't necessarily cold, but she's chilly and heading into Aquarius, conjoining Pluto. Then there's Moon Saturn in Pisces. So there's a sense to me of tension between what these planets are accomplishing. Also, of course, literally Mars is retrograde, Venus is direct, and they're going to be opposing one another. So there was a lot of that going on. The Venus-Pluto conjunction that happens the day after Mars stations retrograde, that's also got the Sun-Jupiter opposition direct. And it happens at 0 Aquarius, which is where we had the great conjunction. So I think it's interesting that Saturn and Jupiter are both heavily present in the signature of that moment. It's happening right at the degree of where that happened, December 21st, 2020. There's just...
Was that Saturn, Pluto? Was that the great
No, that
conjunction,
was,
that?
Saturn, Jupiter at 0 Aquarius.
Got it.
Pluto was still in Capricorn at that point, but yeah, there's just there's also, on the 12th, when we get to the end of this period, which let's come back to that, but Moon Uranus conjunction with the Saturn Jupiter square coming back into degree. So yeah, that's what I was thinking there.
Yeah, I like the idea that there is like a real contrast between Venus and Mars, and this kind of fiery energy that's present with the Sun and Mercury, and a Sun opposite Jupiter, which is, that dynamic is just big and solar no matter what. So, but you put it with the Sun in a fire sign too, and you do have this kind of like, there's excessive heat, and then on the other hand, you have Venus, like, walking naked in deep space or something. She's just like,
Mm-hmm.
she's cold. I like that. The thing that I guess comes to my mind is that when Venus contacts Pluto, this is one of the first really big manifestations of Pluto in Aquarius that we're seeing.
Right.
And so here we have the potential for what I would just call like changes of mind, ideological changes, changes of culture or thought, or social kinds of changes. The transformation of Venus through Pluto is often one that has the power to purge relationships of toxic things, and there can be healing there. There can also be the death of some relationships, or a transformation of social circumstance overall with Venus and Pluto. So I look at those things and I go, yeah. And also Venus and Pluto can be about that kind of dark, and in this case, very lofty sense of beauty, right? Like I think about Alexandra's postings of all of the Venus Pluto artwork. I think that was sometime maybe several months ago now that you did that. And that was so cool. And I like, I wonder what that looks like in Aquarius. What is Venus Pluto's subterranean beauty in the sign that's like so lofty? What does that look like? But whatever she's up to, it feels like, very celestial, very lofty, beautiful, pristine, ideal, maybe a little abstract or rational. And she's being greatly empowered by that contact, I think. I think Pluto and Venus in conjunctions tend to really empower Venus, even if there's something Venusian that goes through the ringer. It's like she usually comes out of the conjunctions, in my experience, feeling like regenerated, and there's a primal like potency that's there with her, and she's coming right out of that into an opposition with Mars. So the Mars retrograde is the 6th, Venus conjoined Pluto is the 7th. About 5 days later, the two planets oppose one another. That opposition, let me put it through here let me just outline it for us as well. So here's the opposition that comes right afterward, happening on the 12th. To me, that's interesting, because you could look at it as sort of Venus approaching a conflict with Mars, but Mars doesn't have the resources or the power to stand its ground or to fight the typical fight that it would fight. You may find a Mars that's much more receptive to something that Venus is asking it to consider. Drop your ego and consider what I have to say. You might find a retrograde Mars in Leo whose pride is not so great that it's unwilling to listen. Maybe this is a Mars that lays down its sword, that can compromise on behalf of a social collective kind of vision, even and not feel threatened on the level of ego. On the other hand, a retrograde Mars could show up as something totally intractable, right? That says, I don't care. Like, it's like, you're not going to capture me with your nice visions of how everything should be. It's an affront to my power or my pride or my ego, and I'm going to be stubborn about it. I could see it going either way. But it is interesting with the retrograde, how to read the kind of tension coming up. The Venus-Mars tension is like the tango. There's something very creative and sexually intense about it. And that's not always a bad thing. There can be very creative in that respect, even if there's a kind of tension. But it is all about how that tension is managed and whether or not, it becomes like a grudge match or not, or a power struggle. And I think there's the possibility that whatever Venus is getting charged up with from Pluto, that it carries over immediately into a confrontation of some kind. But then the question for me is, what kind of Mars are we dealing with here?
Well, right. And Mars, the nature of Mars wants to move forward, right? And so you slow Mars down, and that's where some of that frustration comes back into play. And I could see Venus opposite Mars specifically manifesting in some jealousy. I mean, that's what feels like for me, or like maybe some punishing vibes. But I don't think it's all bad. I think exactly what you were saying with Venus conjoined Pluto, the regenerational, if that's a word, aspect, the regeneration of beauty. And when I think about this archetypally, I'm thinking about Beauty and the Beast. Like, that is Venus, Pluto, and Venus opposite Mars. There's like this passionate quality, right? It's this tale as old as time, but the beast eventually has to take the mask off, and there's this like punishment of society's scorn of the beast, right? And so I feel a lot of that coming through just from an archetypal standpoint in this Venus-Mars hot, cold period. You were talking about what kind of beauty, what kind of art we might see out of Venus conjunct Pluto. And I can't help but feel it is more intellectual than anything, right? In Aquarius, like that, I don't know what that looks like. I'm sure, Alexandra, you'll have some more fabulous examples for us. But what do you think?
Yeah, I'll have to think of some. I'll have to do a little post about that for sure. There's so many incredible artists with Venus Pluto, and it's so easy to look at that placement even natally and be spooked out. And there are, of course there are a range of life experiences that can present, but there's so much incredible art that comes from that. I think it's interesting also that, this is why I kind of was thinking about the running on fumes nature of Mars receiving that trine from Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. Like, it's just so getting gassed up by like your friends and just hearing empty words that are just getting you into this state of something. And, Mercury and Mars are both retrograde. They're both facing the past. Whereas we've got Venus, Pluto in this other place, and the moon exalted in Taurus squaring Venus as well, just applying a little extra like pressure against being overly loving and effusive and nurturing in that way. So, I mean, I'm rooting for Venus in this situation, I guess, is my my
Right.
takeaway.
I always am.
It's kind of like making me think of that scene in Grease. I'm like reference queen today, but where Sandy like dresses up in all the dark clothes and she like gets him on his
Yes.
knees, you know, and she's like, you got to
Yep.
beg for it. That's kind of what
Strutting
it was
through the
giving me.
carnival in her leather.
Yeah.
great.
Let's get it, Sandra D.
I also I wonder if the emphasis on a transformation of thought, idea, philosophy that's just in the air this month, if
Yeah.
the Venus Mars dynamic isn't about how that's playing out in relationships. I just think, for example, of my daughter came home from school the other day, and she was absolutely perplexed by the fact that a classmate of hers has parents who each individually voted for different candidates for the election. She shared it with her at school. She really had a hard time understanding how people could be married but not vote for the same person. And I mean, this is like
Your
great
Virgo rising daughter.
Yeah, my Virgo rising daughter, of course. And she was like, I don't understand it. Like, and so, we just said, people can think different things and still love each other and stuff like that. Right. Anyway, that aside, I'm imagining, like, that just came into my head because I'm imagining if you were living with someone right now and you were in that exact situation, how there's a way in which I can imagine that there's an ongoing, I mean, I don't know, maybe some people just choose not to talk about it too. That could be a thing, right? But if they were people who talked about it, I'm imagining such a couple, and I'm sure there are many in our country who are like this, but I'm imagining that there could be quite a conversation this month, right? and I'm imagining that conversation can't go well unless there is some willingness to say, I love you more than I care to be right. And like, I could see that see, one of the things that's great about Mars in Leo, like one of its best qualities, it's got the bluster and the braggadocio and all those potentially kind of shadowy qualities. But one thing that I think Mars in Leo is, if it loves something, it will really defend and protect and serve like a kind of like a knight, like it has a kind of chivalry. And I could see Mars retrograde saying, you know what, I love you more than I care to be right. Like, wouldn't that be a great manifestation of Mars retrograde in Leo? In which case, again, my hope would be that you might see some examples where Venus opposite Mars comes through as, look, Venus and Pluto, I have some important ideas. I have an important vision, almost like the star card in tarot. Like, it's like there's something beautiful and exciting. And is Mars retrograde in Leo like the strength card, where the angel's holding open the mouth of the lion? Is there some willingness to surrender pride and ego for something that we see as bigger than ourselves? And can we do that while also maybe having different ideas or beliefs than the people that we are opening ourselves to? Like, that to me, and I've thought about that so many times since my daughter told me that story. Like, I'm imagining the most beautiful way that could coexist. And I'm trying to explain to my daughter the most beautiful way that could coexist. Right.
Yeah. That's sweet.
And at the same time, you could imagine the exact same scenario and these exact same transits as an intractable blow up because you've reached an inflection point where these differences are sort of boiling over somehow. I could see that too. But my hope with Mars retrograde in Leo, because I've seen time and time again that during Mars retrogrades, there's a very interesting way in which Mars will lay its sword down, or Mars will sort of sacrifice or surrender for something higher. And in Leo, that could be big gestures of the heart.
I love that.
I love when you do my personal astrology, Adam.
There we go.
I have like the early Mars in Leo, and no, it's so tied into the Mars and Cancer stuff too. Like your guys' horoscopes with Dana and Alex are just always so incredibly spot on. I just laugh. It's just so funny. But
that's good times.
Let's hope I can take your lessons.
Well, I mean, this period is interesting, right? I mean, let's just like put a little bow around it by saying, may we all receive the lessons of whatever this period is, because it's quite intense. Mars retrograde on the 6th, Venus conjoined Pluto on the 7th. while Sun's opposite Jupiter. There's something very passionate happening here, philosophically, ideologically. There's a lot of conviction. And then we have the Venus opposition to Mars. And we'll hope that, cooler heads will prevail. Maybe Venus will, and that there will be a heart-centered form of service that's active somehow. But let's move into the full moon period next, which takes us to the 15th of the month. Here we now have the full moon in Gemini. And of course, we have the full moon in Gemini, right? More of the same with respect to this kind of Mercury-Jupiter dynamic that's so hot all month. And of course, at the exact same time, the full moon in Gemini is on the 15th, at the same day that Mercury is turning direct in Sagittarius. So more of the dialectical, right? What do you guys think?
Alexandra's got to lead us off. She's got so much Gemini.
Yeah. This is so interesting how this ties back to summer. We also have Sun squaring Neptune right around here. It's just a couple days after this, but and then Venus trining and all this, and the Mercury is now exact with Mars. It's just really connected back to this August stuff that was happening. It's a little more intense for Virgos this month, whereas in the summer it was more intense for Sagittarians. And I'm not saying it's going to be catastrophic, but a funny story is like this summer I texted my Sagittarius many planet friend. It's like, how are you? Right around the time of that stuff that was going on, I was checking in on all my Sagittarians. And he's like, great, I went to the Paris Olympics. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then he sends me a picture and he's on a stretcher with a shock blanket over him. He's like, I broke my shoulder. I'm like, did you join the Olympics? Like, what? Did you break your shoulder? How did this happen? And so this month he just got shoulder surgery, and I think he's finding it to be a lot more difficult to recuperate from that surgery than he imagined. And like a true Sagittarian, he started traveling again 2 weeks after that surgery. So all of that just to say, like, I think that there's something about the wax forming and reforming and people being tested and their mutable parts being sort of like restricted in some ways and sort of pushed out in others. That is pretty interesting. And the full moon is a natural culmination of energy that's related to that, but it really brings us into this whole entire end of December is reactivating stuff from July and August, but in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, you bring in all of that context so well. I really like it. I'm a fan of these lunations this month, like the Gemini Sagittarius axis. Ooh, I just make it. There's something here that I think feels positive too, because there's such a social quality to Gemini, right? And here we are in the midst of December and, holiday season. And so I think this is really helpful here. And because this is happening at the same time as Mercury turns direct, it feels positive and productive, right? But because of Mercury turning direct as well, I'm getting this generative quality. It feels magical, like this could be a really good time for some intention setting and some witchery. And of course, that has to do with our Sun square Neptune and Venus trine Jupiter that follow closely here. But I'm a fan overall.
Yeah, I like that the full moon in Gemini is in Mercury's rulership and Mercury's turning direct, and we're going to go through the whole Mercury Jupiter thing all over again. It really does feel like okay, so when I was in my undergrad, I was for an entire semester I was on the debate team. I only did one semester, but I joined the debate team, and I learned about the actual, I don't know, it's like a sport. It's kind of weird. People think that people just sit in a room and debate, but there's actually like a team, and the way you practice is really interesting too, where you'll be given an issue and you'll be assigned which side of the issue you have to argue for. And then in debate team, our practice, we'd be forced to flip and then argue for the opposite side. And I feel like that way of thinking was really, I don't know, it really changed me, because I would be like, well, when I went into the debate team, I thought that you kind of got to pick what you wanted to debate for, right? I don't know why I had such an, like, it was just a kind of naive assumption. Oh no, you don't get to pick. You're learning how to debate. In a way, it's kind of like sophistry in ancient Greek.
Yeah.
Ancient Greece. It's like, I felt so disingenuous arguing for things that I didn't really believe,
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? There could be, I feel like, this little loop-de-loop of that we've been in since late November all the way through this month, of Mercury opposite Jupiter, Jupiter opposite Mercury, again through retrograde, again through direct motion, the full moon pinging off from the same dynamic, the sun opposing Jupiter earlier in the month, just the whole thing over and over and over again. I just get the feeling like there might be a process where we are being asked to genuinely believe in and care about something that we don't feel like we can, or we don't feel like it's possible, or that, or even that we're going to simply have to compromise mentally or intellectually with something that we don't yet understand, but we are forced to live with or trust. I have had a number of people in my life that I've spoken with in the past week, and students in our Roots and Spheres program and elsewhere, who have shared this exact same sentiment. And I've been so interested in it. So this is for people who didn't like the results of the election, that have had the result and that have had this exact response. And I've at least a dozen times I've heard this. Well, it's not what I wanted, but what I'm trying to do right now is simply accept there could be larger reasons for this result than I understand. And that's a kind of faith-based approach that lots of people take in life when bad things happen, right? Or when things that outcomes that they don't like happen, or they don't get a job, or like whatever the case might be, you go, okay, I don't like that. But rather than going down a path of disaster thinking and despair or whatever, I'm going to maintain my optimism, even though I don't really have any evidence from my perspective of why I should, or you know what I mean? And I'm so interested to hear so many people responding that way, which I find admirable, but that's because I'm, I just am a kind of faithful, I grew up a preacher's kid. I can't help myself. So, yeah, I mean, this is something though that strikes me as a real possibility during this time, because you got this full moon in Gemini, Mercury direct, the whole thing about to repeat itself, and the sun also squaring Neptune, which to me is that combination is often about faith. It's often about, what lifts me up, what is the tide that lifts, or the tide that lifts all boats. Like, what is the thing that I can ride in some way to a vision of hope in the midst of things that are difficult or trying, or that I'm mentally torn up about. And I see that with Sun square Neptune, and then Venus trine Jupiter, which also has a lot of hope in it, and there's a lot of kind of good energy with Venus trining Jupiter as well. And so I just wonder if we're not kind of the quintessential making some lemonade out of lemons in this little stretch.
I totally feel that. And I love that we have the solar fortune on one side and the lunar fortune on the other of this dynamic. Like, it's really special. And in a like you're talking kind of about debate in these two sides, but in the soul realm, SOLE singular, there's like something that Jupiter was going through Gemini trying to accomplish. There's like some agenda there, and it's stationed retrograde at 21 degrees Gemini on October 9th. And this moon, I think it's important that it's happening just outside the reach of that station. Like, Jupiter was pushing and trying to accomplish something, and then stationed to try to let's rethink some of that was going on. And it's like, here we're getting the details right. Like we talked about on our episode for August, the details are wrong, but it feels now with that mutual reception, and we've got the solar power on one side and the lunar power on the other, that we're seeing some echo, or we're seeing some optimism or some vision of that thing that's out of our reach that we're now going to plow right forward to when Jupiter stations direct.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't be more Oh my God, just everything you just said, it was like my own little personal reading. Yeah, that was so good. So let me just share this really quickly. So again, and I've talked about this a little bit, but in August, I've gone through in the past year a really like a gradual learning process with respect to my training and working with a few different coaches and sort of slowly but surely finding a more appropriate match for who I am and the kind of philosophy that's like right for me on that level. Which really is not just about training and results on the physical level, but it's also about sleep and eating and diet and, the whole thing. So I switched coaches in August and I totally had the right idea, right? But the details weren't right yet. And that was August, the whole shift in another coach. And then just as I'm starting to go, you know what, the details aren't quite right. I'm going back to competition, and this new coach comes in, and now I really feel like I have found a match, and the details are getting ironed out. And interestingly, because something that I do quite regularly is I maybe like every 3 months I have my blood work done because I want to see how I'm doing, just how I'm doing across the board. I'm very like up on that. And I just with this new regiment did my numbers, and all of the numbers are exactly where I wanted them to be. And in August with the new coach, the training was right, but the actual physiological details weren't exactly where I wanted them to be. Isn't that fascinating? So
Wow.
it's precisely what you were just saying.
That's so cool. Congrats, by the way. That's big.
A lot. Well, it's a lot because it's one thing that I really like, I feel very passionately about, and this is just my own little soapbox, but like every body is so different, and every body really needs to figure out the exact kind of nutrients that really work for it. It's not just like there's not just like one diet that works for everybody. There's not one kind of training that works for everybody. And the more that I've learned, the more it's been about going from kind of cookie cutter programs to really figuring out who I am, what my body is, and what it actually needs. And that's reflected in those panels. So you can be like, okay, well, this diet has been, for example, one of the things that I just really realized was that I have to shift some of the forms of protein. Have to vary it a little bit more. Too much red meat's not good for my cholesterol. A noticeable difference. And some people will argue up and down that it doesn't matter at all what kind of meat you eat that affects your cholesterol. And so it's just little things like that where, the details getting ironed out is really a super good way of thinking about the transition from August to now with respect to shifts that have been happening.
Wow, I never connected those. But in August we talked about that stuff, and I shared that I was like trying to get my postpartum nutrition and hormones in check too. And I literally have the test from my nutritionist. I just did my blood test, and my hormone test is like sitting right over here. So it's like doing the exact same thing. I mean, I guess we both have Gemini and 6th house stuff going on, but like, I even have seen it through astrology and just my life. Like I was so insanely busy in August, and then I took some steps back and I was like, I actually need to take space. And then in my brain over the past couple of weeks, I was like, oh, December 15th through the end of the year, I'm going to take off work, because in August I was so busy I couldn't breathe. And now I need 2 weeks to recoup, literally, because my client practice has just been awesomely busy. And in my brain, I was like, on the 15th, that's when I'll take a break. And then I was preparing this document and I was like, oh, the astrology popping off as usual.
I also would like, go ahead, Whitney.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's a great decision, because what we're seeing here coming in at the middle of the month is this ability to really have that constructive vision. So yes, in stepping back, you can also be thinking forward. And again, it's that dance, that back and forth that we've been talking about through this month. So that's really cool. Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
I'll say too, I think that this, just like Venus trine Jupiter on the 19th, I think this sets us up for a really magical solstice too. And I'm happy about that.
Well, you better be, because you're going to come to our solstice event, I hope.
You know I am.
Yeah, totally. We're hosting a solstice gathering on the 21st in Minneapolis. So people are listening, you're in Minneapolis. I will be promoting that on my everyday channel and website and newsletter. And there'll be like a little Eventbrite page on the website that you can connect with to RSVP. It's free. We're going to get together. We're going to do a little movement, and then we're going to do a little quiet meditation and reflection. And then we're going to have some snacks and hangout time, and yeah, just get together and, for ritual. I mean, it's been years for us since prior to COVID that we had a yoga studio for 10 years, and we had live community in addition to teaching things online. And it's just, we're feeling like it's time to get back to that a little bit. So hopefully some community from the area will be able to attend.
Doesn't that feel so Aquarian too?
Sounds amazing. Sounds
getting
beautiful.
back together.
Yeah, totally. Well, so this period around the full moon, you guys want to add anything to it before we move into the month's end? I think we did it.
I think let's go to month's end.
I always know that it's working when something it happens multiple times, when we're breaking down the astrology of the month, where something clicks and I go, oh my God, I can see it. Like just translated exactly into something I've experienced. At the month's end, we have 2 transits we're going to look at. Of course, there is the Jupiter-Saturn square. So we have this Jupiter-Saturn square. Now, don't expect some massive event on that day. I warn people really, because it's a process-oriented transit. When you guys see the video that I did on Jupiter square Saturn, and you see the journaling prompts that I did to look at for the entirety of a Jupiter-Saturn cycle, the changes are about, an evolution in the way we think and the way that our experiences lead to the cultivation of different kinds of wisdom in our life, and how that leads to changes in other areas. So it really is
so subtle. I had multiple clients that I've been working with, and it's taken multiple meetings to try to get to where we can pinpoint that cycle. It's really subtle.
It is. And I mean, again, I think the prompts I gave in that journaling exercise will be perfect for people who are not just able to nail it right away and see where it's happening and how it's happening. So make sure you check that episode out. But Jupiter square Saturn really does reflect the ongoing process of, I like to think about it as transformations of wisdom and structure, of the ideals and beliefs that hold our lives together, the ideals and beliefs that we try that are somehow ideal. They feel they're archetypal, and we try our best for our institutions, our governments, our schools, our religions to approximate an ideal, but they fall short because they're impermanent and the material world is always changing, and there's death and transformation happening constantly, impermanence. And so the Jupiter-Saturn cycles reflect the ongoing process of wisdom and how we try to build and create things that most closely approximate what we think to be wise. And that process of change and evolution is always ongoing and often, again, very dialectical. Like, I think about this, and I'm not suggesting this is happening right now, so please don't take me the wrong way. I wouldn't know if it was, but I just think back to the fact that there have been so many times in the history of the United States where, if you look back at what a party looked like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, they're often really different. The nature of what constitutes a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, or how we describe liberal versus conservative, those terms have looked like very different things at different times. And I use that only to say that the process of how we try to create structures around beliefs and ideals are constantly morphing, right? So it's really interesting, because I was talking to an elder in my life, I'll just say that, and we were reflecting about the election, and they just made the comment, it just doesn't feel like the same old Democratic Party anymore. Mm. And I've heard other people, I have a family member who's quite conservative, a Republican, saying that, yes, I'm voting for Trump, but it doesn't feel like the Republican Party anymore. So for people I have heard in my life who have said that on both sides, that they don't feel like this party is the same one that they knew at some other point in their life. And I say that only because that is such a thing to happen under a Jupiter-Saturn cycle. And this all began in 2020 with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And so the fact that those kinds of conversations are in the air is one way of seeing it collectively. And it's a little bit harder to identify personally sometimes.
Yeah, and transformation of our social systems and how we organize government. I mean, I think it's imminent under Pluto and Aquarius as well. So
yeah,
makes sense.
And imagine how our frameworks would change if we found the space creatures in the ocean.
Right? The funniest part of that, like with the Pluto and Aquarius, is like, yes, Pluto and Aquarius, but also Saturn and Pisces, like the fear from the ocean,
sure.
like was so funny.
But totally.
I think something about this square that's interesting too is like the first opening square of this series, it was like Saturn was retrograde, now Jupiter's retrograde. And then next summer, right after Jupiter moves into Cancer, they'll both be direct, making a square from Cancer to Aries. So it's just such an ever-changing conversation. That's why it's so hard to pin down. Well, I'm sure it is for many reasons, but I am with you. The fact that Jupiter comes from air sign Aquarius, and then this square happens with Jupiter and Gemini. There's such an intellectual, social, cultural shift happening that I think will probably take the entire cycle to see with enough like hindsight or distance or loftiness to be able to categorize and write eloquently about.
Yeah, true. Let's look
at the last. And listen, on a very practical standpoint, like this Jupiter square Saturn on the 24th, I mean, there couldn't be a better time to just like take a step back, right? Slow your roll, slow down. You know, if you celebrate the holidays, that fits perfectly.
Right. And I like that coming in at the very end of the month, there is another Venus-Uranus dynamic. We went from the trine at the beginning of the month from Cap to Taurus, and now into the Aquarius-Taurus square. That Venus square to Uranus, I remember when it came through last year, because obviously we've seen this a bunch with Uranus and Taurus. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was around that time, it was right before I ended my client practice, I had a spike in like maybe over the course of about a week as that transit was applying, where like half of my clients wanted to talk about what is it called? Like cosmetic surgeries.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was like, and I thought it was really interesting because Venus and Aquarius square Uranus and Taurus can be very much about sort of the advanced technology of beauty and the body and like youth and obsession with youthfulness. And I mean, whatever, it could have a dark side to it as well. But I was impressed by that. I was like, oh, wow, Venus and Aquarius square Uranus and Taurus is like a med spa.
Absolutely.
So
imagine what they're coming out with now, you know?
I know, right? What the aliens will give us too. They'll give us the best skincare products.
Some new skin grafts or something.
No, I mean, what else do you guys think about this one at the end of the month here?
Go for it, Alexandra.
I totally hear you about I actually have been seeing a lot of that. There's a number of like celebrities who've been popping up and people are like, wow, you look very different. What's going on? But I think the first of all, Christmas is a Scorpio moon, and then New Year's is a Mars-Pluto opposition. And it's just like, Merry Christmas, Scorpio moon, Happy New Year, Mars-Pluto. It's like just not it's going to be, there's some tension there, not scary again, but I am still feeling those Macbeth vibes. Like we're still fighting those ghosts as we go on.
You know what the soundtrack for this Christmas or this holiday season should be? This is when you pull out like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Yeah. Wow. Whitney. Yes. Talk about Venus, Uranus at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that.
With the Mars,
there's a guy with a mane playing the electric guitar.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just struck with inspiration.
No, that was so on point.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that Venus is squaring Uranus and then imminently Mars opposes Pluto. It is as though Venus is now like puppeteering Mars. I feel like after their meeting and their opposition, like it's funny how Mars's continuation. It was just a couple degrees ago for Mars that it met Venus in its sign, right? Venus has gone and traveled on quite a bit, of course, because Mars is moving so slow. But my point is just that we've been, since the Venus Mars opposition, it's been sort of like you're just waiting for Mars to oppose Pluto. And it's fascinating that the engagement begins as Venus squares Uranus. It just does feel like they're in a whole sign opposition. I wonder if this isn't then intimately connected to the opposition at the beginning of the year somehow.
Yeah, I think that natally, like, just a lot depends. And I think it's necessary to say that because of how we're recording this. And like, I'm just already sensing with the Pluto transits, the fear and the rhetoric is so big. People are going to be like freaked out by this Mars Pluto again, especially because Mars is retrograde. It's so dependent on your natal astrology. Mars is one of those planets. Like, some people love Mars, have an incredible relationship with Mars, an adoring one even. And some people have a really difficult relationship with Mars. So definitely, try to suss that out. Send your favorite astrologer a DM. There's so many talented astrologers who do Mars readings and stuff like that. So you can figure that out. But I think the end of the month, like, ends in this weird tense place, liminal space. I think it's interesting, even in the way we record the podcast and the way we count months in the calendar. It just happens in this liminal space between like December 31st and January 3rd, where we're kind of like cliff hung, feeling that tension, the fear, the anticipation of those transits.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way of putting it. Well, on that note, we have reached the end of our content for the month. I want to tell you how you can schedule a reading with two of my favorite astrologers, Alexandra and Whitney.
That's us.
So you can find Alexandra at 9livesastrology.com, where you can book a reading. And Instagram is 9livesastrology, where you can see her astrological sharing and content that she creates there too. So highly recommend that, especially if you want to look at some of these transits, track out Jupiter-Saturn, see what the Mars-Pluto thing is doing, and whatever else, because there's always a lot going on when you get down to the specifics of the birth chart, and Alexandra will be happy to help you. And then Whitney, you can find at astroarcana.com. And then on Instagram, you can also find, on her website, by the way, is where you can book a reading. And then Instagram, you can also astro.arcana.astrology. You can follow Whitney's content there. And is the replay of your bye-bye party available? Can people still watch that?
Yeah, it's on both of our Instagrams.
Yeah, I haven't watched the whole thing, but I watched part of it, and I thought it was lovely. So I'm glad you guys did that.
It was fun. It was necessary.
Yeah. Totally.
See ya.
Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. And we all wish you a very happy solstice, holidays, whatever you celebrate at this time of year. And we will be back at the end of December for a breakdown of January's astrology. After I sign off here and we say goodbye, there's a little video I've tagged on telling you about the different rewards that are available when you support the channel through the Kickstarter. We're trying to get to 1,937 backers by January 1st. That's one backer better than last year. We're always just trying to see if we can grow the support for the channel a little bit more every year. And again, we have tons of great rewards when you do. Thank you to everybody who's already donated. We really appreciate you. And on that note, we will say goodbye. Take it easy, everyone. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you about the different rewards that we offer when you donate and support our channel in the year ahead. So you'll find a link to the Kickstarter in the description of this video, in the comments section of this video, as well as on our website, nightlightastrology.com. If you head over there, you'll see at the top of the page there is a menu item that says Kickstarter 2025. You can click on that and be taken over to the Kickstarter campaign page. So once you're there, if you scroll down on the right-hand side, you're going to see different pledge levels and different gifts and sales that we run as a way of saying thank you for your support. So among those, our most popular offering by far are the major discounts that we offer on our training programs. So if you are interested in studying astrology at Nightlight in 2025, whether you're a brand new student or a currently enrolled student who's thinking of taking one of our year 2, 3 horary programs, you're going to find that these are the best rates that we run on the entire year. And we do this as a way of both saying thank you and also of helping us raise funds to support the channel, our staff, and everything we do. So you'll see attend one Nightlight course there. That's about 50% off the total cost of the program and about $500 off the early bird rate. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see that if you bundle 2 courses together, the savings go way up. Bundle 3, they go up even more. I mean, the difference between the 2 and 3 class package is $200. So $200 more, you get 3 of our year-long programs. And if you get all the way to the 4 class pass, then you have all 4 years of our program. You can take them at any pace you like, renew them whenever you like. There's no timeline on when you use these class passes. And you will have all 4 years of content at about 75% off each of the programs individually when you get that bundle. So those are our best savings for sure. Highly recommend those. If you have any questions about our courses or programs, email us info@nightlightastrology.com or look at the website under the classes page, courses page. You'll find information about each of the individual courses we offer. And then if you scroll up, you're going to find some of our other programs that are greatly discounted. Ashley's Herbal Foundations apprenticeship course, which many people are interested in who come through our Moon Circle that Ashley and I lead each month. You scroll up, you're going to find our masterclass series for 2025, greatly discounted, as well as our Roots and Spheres Moon Circle, greatly discounted. There's hundreds of dollars of savings in each of those. So we really try to make sure that the Kickstarter acts as a good flash sale for all of our programs. You'll then find some really nice prices on previous archive talks, like our 2024 archive masterclass bundle, which is about 30 hours worth of content on specialized topics in astrology. You can see the topics listed in each of the bundles as you scroll through. 2023's masterclass bundle, huge savings on those and a lot of really great content. You'll see a few reading options as you continue to go from the bottom to the top. You'll see the 2025 year ahead mini reading. There's only 30 of these. These are individualized birth chart readings that I do, looking at the most significant transit in your birth chart for 2025. I record those personally. You'll then see that there is an Ask 3 Horary Questions option where you can get 3 horary questions to redeem whenever you'd like within the year ahead. Those are kind of yes, no predictive questions. Will I get the job? Will we get together? Things like that. Then you'll see the Astrology for Complete Beginners course is also discounted through the Kickstarter. This is a great 10 hours worth of content for people who are brand new to astrology. So whether that's you or maybe a gift for somebody else. And then you're going to see some individual master classes that are greatly discounted from the past year. So all of 2024's masterclass series are the archives of which 8 to 10 hours each are on sale. And then scroll up a little bit more and you'll see one of our most popular offerings, which are the year ahead horoscope readings. These year ahead horoscope readings include 30 to 45 minutes of a breakdown of all the major transits of the year ahead for each sun and rising signs. You get all of them with this package, which is a great deal. It's like 10 hours worth of content, 8, 9, 10 hours, somewhere in there. I haven't finished recording all of them yet. So as of the time I'm recording this, I'm anticipating it'll land around 10 hours. But yeah, anyway, so you scroll up, you'll see those horoscope videos will all be delivered to you right around January 1st when the Kickstarter ends. Scroll up a little bit more, you'll find The Oracle Speaks, which is my book, and this is being released chapter by chapter. It is a book about the inner experience of learning to speak with oracles, and it is being released chapter by chapter in both text and audiobook form, so you can listen along to my new book. And that takes us up to the Astrology of 2025 video. This, for your donation at the $50 level, gives you an exclusive talk breaking down all of the major astrological transits of 2025. I look in depth at some of the biggest things happening in the year ahead and break them down in advance. And that's the only place I release that video or that take on the whole year ahead. Finally, at the very top, the most basic level of donation, you'll see the Astrology of 2025 calendar. This is a PDF calendar we design and make that allows you to track and move along with the astrology as the year unfolds. This is also great if you want to track what we're going to be talking about week by week on my channel. You'll get a glimpse at the biggest transits of each day and month and week. And that will give you some sense of where we're heading with our coverage of the astrology on the channel as the year unfolds. So again, any questions about any of the rewards that you see, email us info@nightlightastrology. Link is in the description, comments, or on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Help us get to 1,937 backers by January 1st. We deeply appreciate your contribution. We try to make sure we have some really special rewards to say thank you when you contribute. All right, take it easy. Bye.